All right, you guys, it's time for our first lesson for the zinnia. We're going to be starting in the middle of the flower to make the stamen first, and we're going to be learning the continuous loop technique. This is the first technique that I expect my beginners to learn. You're going to find as you go through French beading that the techniques, they increase in complexity as they move on, and it all starts right here with these little loops. When we get to the petals and the calyx of the flower, we're actually going to be taking this continuous loop technique and modifying it a little bit. So it is important that you get this continuous loop technique down first. Now in French beading, whenever you see the word continuous in a technique name, that means you're going to be making multiple pieces all on the same length of wire. So there's actually 3 pieces in our stamen. We have a unit A, a unit B, and a unit C. And each of these components is made on a single wire. So all the unit C is made all on the same wire, unit B is made all on one wire, and unit A is all on one wire. Okay, so we are working with a continuous technique. And how to start a continuous technique, you need to leave a 2 to 3 inch tail wire right at the beginning. I will often refer to this as the starting tail wire. Now this is going to be one of the wires that we use to attach the unit to the actual flower stem when we're assembling. So that's 2 or 3 inches unless the pattern specifically tells you otherwise. And I'm going to pinch and hold right at the end of that starting tail wire. And I'm going to move down 7 beads from my spool. Now, in a pattern, you're going to see something called the working wire. That is referring to this long length of wire that's still attached to your spool with all the beads on it. All right, so I've got my 7 beads here. Let me try and get in closer. All right, and I'm going to pinch and hold that spot right at the beginning so it doesn't move around on my wire. And then I'm going to fold these beads in half. And I'm going to pinch them between my thumb and forefinger. And this is just going to help us to keep tension on these beads so we don't have any gaps forming between any of the beads along our wire. All right, so I'm going to pinch and hold like this. And then with my other hand, I'm going to grab both ends right at the bottom, both ends of that loop at the bottom. And I'm going to twist the 2 wires underneath. 1, 2, 3. I usually do about 3 twists, which is 1.5 rotations. And that will give us our first loop. Now you don't want to twist down any further than this. 1 or 2 rotations is pretty standard. But below these loops, if you twist down any further, you're going to end up with a longer stem below it. That's going to either push the unit further out from the flower than it needs to be, or to make it a little bit taller in the flower than it should be. So just some nice, really tight twist there at the bottom. We want a short, twisted stem underneath it, but we also want it to be secure. Okay, so we're going to bring down 7 more beads from our spool for our second loop. Now the spacing in a continuous unit is very important. We want to have about 1/8 of an inch left over between our loops after we're done twisting the wires. So we're going to leave a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch in order to give us some space to twist. So a little bit more there. It's not 1/4 of an inch, it's right in between. It's 3/16 of an inch is what I usually use, but I don't measure it, I just eyeball it. All right, you don't need to go get your ruler out for this or anything. So again, we're going to leave small space in our wire. And I'm going to hold that space with my thumbnail to make sure that my beads don't slide down, because I don't want this space in the wire to shrink at all, and I don't want it to get any bigger. So I'm going to hold that space there, and I'm going to fold my beads in half, and also add that there to my little pinched wire at the beginning. And I'm going to hold tension on those beads to make sure that no gaps form. With my other hand, I'm going to grab the bottom ends of each side of the loop, and then I'm going to twist 2, 3. All right, so that gives us our second loop there with a tiny little bit of space left over between the loops. All right, now I'm going to show you a different way to make these loops. I know some people don't like to use their nails as tools, so I'm going to show you another way to do this so you don't have to use your nails. Now this is not the way that you normally make loops. It feels really weird to me because my muscle memory is built up a different way, so it feels really weird to me. All right, so I'm going to leave that same amount of space between my second loop and my third one. And I'm actually going to flip these beads over on themselves to cross those two wires beneath. And then again, I'm going to grab and I'm going to twist, 2, 3. All right, now I've got my third loop there. And I'm going to continue on. I need 3 more loops. Leave a little space. Pinch and hold. Fold. Grab and twist. 2, 3. All right, so now I've got all 6 loops made. Now I mentioned before that the spacing is important. And one thing, if you have too much space between your loops, then your unit is going to end up being too large for the flower. It's not going to fit with the other pieces. However, if you do it, like mine aren't all exactly perfectly the same, and that's okay. You know, it evens out as long as you're pretty close, it's just fine. But if you do have 2 that are a little bit too far apart, you can just twist that loop one more time to try and shorten the wire between. And that should work just fine. All right, now we're going to close Unit A a little bit differently than we would a normal continuous loop unit. We'll see the normal way with Unit B. But Unit A is a little bit weird. So I'm going to take my working wire. There's one still attached to my spool. I'm going to take my working wire and we're actually going to cross it down between the second and third loop. And we're going to fold it to the bottom and we're going to pull it tight. And that's going to pull that 6th loop right into the middle of the first 5 loops. I'm going to hold this down at the bottom while I switch to my starting loop. And I rotated my unit here, so I've got loop 1 here, loop 6 in the middle, and loop 5 is over here. So I'm going to take my starting tail wire and I'm going to wrap it around loop 5. Right at the base, right below that loop. Wrap it around 2 times should be fine. All right. So after you've done that, it'll look kind of like this. So we've got that 6th loop in the middle, and the first 5 loops are closed into a circle around that 6th loop. And then we're going to fold them up. And then we're going to twist the 2 wires below just a few times, just enough to secure it. So we're going to take the starting tail wire and the working wire, and we're going to twist them 1, 2, 3, 4, just a few times for now. During assembly, when we put all the stamen pieces together, we're actually going to be twisting all of these stem wires together. And if you have a lot of twists here, it's going to make a lumpier stem. So just a few twists for now. And we'll be twisting further later. All right, now this unit is complete and I can cut it off of my spool, but I want to cut my wires to a different length. I don't want them to be the exact same length all the way down. A little bit longer, a little bit shorter. Now we do this just to help. We don't want all of our wires to end at the same spot on our flower stem because that's going to create some unwanted bumps and notches in the side of your stem. So if we do this, it'll help the stem wire to slowly taper down in size instead of ending all at the same spot. All right, so there is Unit A, and you need to make one of these for each flower. All right, now let's take a look at Unit B for our Zinnia stamen. The pattern, we are still working with this 26 gauge brown copper core wire, and we are still using the brown beads. And the component that we're going to make is 8 CL using 7 beads in each loop. And we need to make one of these for each zinnia. So we are using the same technique. We've got that same starting tail wire, and we're going to make the loops. They're actually the same size loop, we're just making a couple extra. And then I'm still attached to my working spool, or sorry, my working wire is still attached to my spool for now. And we're actually going to close this one, like I described before, we're going to close it into a circle. This one we don't need the hole to plug because unit A is actually going to sit right in the middle and plug that hole for us. So we're going to take this working wire and we're going to cross it between the first and second loops. And we're going to wrap around that first loop one time. Alright, now if I were to just bring this down to the bottom and twist them together, what I've got here is my two wires off to the side. Now, if I were to put this on a flower stem, I want my flower stem to be in the oops, sorry, I'm off screen. I want my flower stem to be in the middle. But if my stem wire is off to the side, it's going to pull that stem wire over. So what we're going to do is we're going to center our stem wire. So I'm going to take again that working wire that's still attached to my spool, and I'm going to go across to the other side of the unit. I'm going on the underside because that's where my wire was positioned when I was done wrapping, but you can go over the top if you want to. It's not going to make any difference. We're going to go across and we're going to wrap around one of the loops on the other side. And now we've got the two wires on opposite sides of our unit, and we can bring them together closer toward the center of the flower. Now I like to put my thumb in the middle of my unit because we want to make sure that when we tug on these wires that we're not squishing our unit into an oval shape. We want to keep it a circle. So I'm going to put my thumb here and my two fingers underneath to try and hold it wide so it doesn't squish in when I pull on these wires. Alright, so I'm going to bring them together in the center and twist them just a few times. And then we're going to cut it from the spool. And again, we want them to be different lengths. Alright, so that is Unit B for our Zinnia stamen. And again, you need one of these for each flower that you're making. Alright, now it's time for Unit C. Unit C is a little bit weird. This one is beneficial to see before we start making it, just so you can kind of see what we're making because it is different than usual. Unit C has 10, let me spread this out here, has 10 loops that look like this. We have here a 10 bead brown loop, and in the middle, kind of interrupting that brown loop, we have a 5 bead yellow loop twisted right into the middle. So when we string our beads, we need to string them so we have 5 brown, then 5 yellow, then 5 brown for each of the loops. And we have 10 loops. So when you finish, it's going to look something like this. I'm going to add one more on here because I want to show you guys something. I didn't cover this in our stringing beads video at the beginning of the class, so I want to show you another way that you can string loose beads rather than using a bead spinner. It's called a scooping method. You need to put your beads in a little cup or bowl like this, and your wire needs to be kind of in a curved shape. And you're going to tilt the cup on its side and just kind of stab the beads until they go on. Alright, so 5 yellow. And let's see, I need to add 5 more brown at the beginning. Okay. So when you're done stringing all of your beads, it's going to look like this. And then we'll have 5 brown, 5 yellow, 5 brown for the first loop. And then 5 brown, 5 yellow, 5 brown for the second loop, and so on. Alright, now this is a continuous technique again. We're going to be working with continuous loops. We need to start this time by making a little loop right in the end of our wire, and that's going to help prevent some of our beads from falling off right here. And then of course we're going to leave that same 2 to 3 inch tail wire right at the beginning. Alright, so these are the beads we need for one loop. 5 brown, 5 yellow, 5 brown. And we're actually going to be starting in the middle, so we're just going to move these 5 brown beads out of the way for now, which is why we have this little loop at the end. And we're going to take these yellow beads and we're going to make them into a loop. So we're going to fold them in half, just like normal. Pinch and hold between your thumb and forefinger. And then we're going to twist the 2 wires below, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5, 5 times. The little twisted wire stem should end up being about 1/8 of an inch, and it doesn't need to be exact, just somewhere around there is perfectly fine. And then we're going to take the 5 brown beads at the start and the 5 brown beads after. And then we're going to fold those 2 into a loop. And we're going to grab the brown beads below and twist 2, 3. And there we have the first loop for Unit C of our stamen. Now for the second one, we need to leave a little bit of wire at the beginning, and it's going to be a little bit more than usual because we also have to make these twists below the loop in the middle, as well as the twists below. So we're going to move these brown beads out of the way, put them down at the bottom, and then we're going to measure about 5/8 of an inch, which is about right there. So that's how much space I'm going to be leaving in my wire, including the brown beads and the space between the brown and the yellow. And I'm going to pinch and hold that space. I'm going to double check that space. I think it might have moved. Okay. Alright, so I made a little sharp bend in my wire right there just so I can tell where that measurement ends. Don't be too rough if you do these because it will make your wire weaker. So just very gently make a little notch there if you need to help keep your measurement. Okay, so that's my spacing. And I'm going to fold the yellow beads and twist them 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, now I've got 5 brown beads on the right and 5 brown beads on the left. And I'm going to hold, I've got a little bit of space left over there, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to fold those together and I'm going to twist 2, 3. Alright, so now I've got 2. Let's do this one more time. Okay, I'm going to bring down the beads I need for this third loop. Push those brown beads all the way down to the bottom, and then we're going to measure out 5/8 of an inch from the bottom of the brown beads. Make a little notch if you need it. And then we're going to fold those yellow beads into a loop and twist 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 beads on each side. Fold. And make sure that they are pushed up all the way. Sometimes you can get a little gap right here because those beads, you have a twisted wire in the center, so sometimes it doesn't want to go completely up against that wire. So get it as close as you can. Make sure you're pushing up on those beads to hold the tension. And then twist 2, 3. Alright, so there's the first 3 loops, and you need to continue until you have 10. And then your unit is going to look like this one. Now notice all my twisted wires underneath my yellow loops aren't all exactly the same length. That's perfectly okay. You don't need to worry about that. Alright, so we're going to close Unit C the same way we did Unit B by taking the working wire and wrapping once around that first loop to close it into a circle. And then we need to center our wire, so we're going to bring that working wire across the top or under the bottom. It's okay, either way will work. And we're going to wrap around the bottom of a loop on the opposite side of the unit. And after you're done wrapping, make sure that you are on the bottom side of the unit. And then we've got a working wire on one side and the starting tail wire on the other. And I'm going to put my thumb right in the middle and my fingers on either side so that my unit doesn't squish when I do this. And then I'm going to bring the two wires together in the middle, and I'm just going to twist them together just a few times. Just enough to secure the unit for now. Alright, so at that point your unit C is going to look like this, and we're going to do a little bit of shaping before we assemble. We're going to take our thumb and put it directly below the yellow loop, and we're going to fold those yellow loops in. So we actually want them to sit horizontal, while the brown ones are going to be going straight up in the flower. We're going to go around and we're going to fold all of these loops down. Now be very gentle when you do this. Sometimes twisted wires, especially when you're working with a thinner gauge like a 26, they can weaken the wires a little bit when you twist them. So if you're too rough after you twist it, you might end up snapping those wires. So I've got them all folded down, and then I'm going to kind of gently squeeze it between my fingers. To fold all of those little loops upward so they stand upright. And I'm going to go through and kind of shape it a little bit. It's okay if it's a little bit wonky for now, because during assembly we can fix that up. So that is the finished unit C. You need to make one of these for each of your zinnia. Normally I wait until after I've finished making all of my flower pieces to assemble. I just like finishing one task before moving on to the next one. But I also don't like having all these little pieces floating around my workstation. You could put them in individual baggies if you want to help keep them separate and so they don't get lost. But I'm going to go ahead and assemble the stamen now so I don't have to worry about losing anything. So I've got one unit A, one unit B, and one unit C. And I'm going to take the unit A. I've got these two wires sticking out of the bottom. They're going to go right into the middle of unit B. And you got to make sure that both of those little tail wires go into the same hole. There's a couple of different holes down here, so go through the same one and push it all the way down. No, I didn't get in the same hole. Okay, push it all the way down. And it'll look like this. Unit B should kind of form a little bit of a cup shape around unit A. And then we're going to do the same thing with unit C. We're going to take all four of these little wires and we're going to push them into the middle of unit C, making sure that all those wires go through the same hole. And just push it all the way into the middle. And it should go down all the way underneath those yellow little florets in the center, little stamen. Should go all the way down underneath those. All right, so we can kind of fold unit C around. All right, now I got to twist all of these wires down here together. This part is why it was so important for us to only twist a little bit at a time after we closed all of the units. If you have any extra lumps, or sorry, any extra twists here in your wires, it's going to cause extra lumps on your flower stem. You get a smoother twist if you twist straight wires together rather than twisted wires together. So I'm going to push down on the unit A and B in the center with my thumb just to try and keep it tight, and I'm going to push upward on the bottom of unit C with my my first and second fingers, just to make sure that those units are really tight and close together while I'm twisting these wires together. All right, so I'm going to make sure that they are very straight, and then I'm going to twist down, and I don't need to twist down all the way. About an inch is just fine, and you want to try to make this as smooth as you can. Because again, lumps on these stems will show on your flower stem. right, let's mold that unit C again. Okay, I'm going to double check my wires and make sure that they're all cut to different lengths. And they look fine to me, so I'm going to leave that. And there we have a finished stamen.